Republicans enter the 2026 Senate cycle with a 4-seat lead after flipping 4 seats, along with the presidency last November. That leaves Democrats at a structural disadvantage, and the new map doesn't do them any favors either. Of the 13 seats they're defending in 2026, 2 are in states Donald Trump carried in 2024, Michigan and Georgia. Another 5 Democratic-held seats are in states Kamala Harris carried by less than 10 percentage points: Minnesota, New Hampshire, New Jersey, Virginia, and New Mexico. Meanwhile, Republicans are defending just 1 seat in a state Harris won, Maine, while North Carolina is the only GOP-held seat in a state Trump won by a single-digit margin. Put all that together, and it makes sense why Republicans are clear favorites to hold control of the Senate, according to the prediction market on Kalshi. In today's video, I'm going to fill out the map with my latest predictions, considering each state's partisan lean, incumbency status, recent election results, expert forecasts, and, where available, the latest prediction market odds via Kalshi. Let's start with the obvious. Some seats are safely in each party's column. For Democrats, there's little reason to worry about Oregon, where incumbent Jeff Merkley is seeking a 4th term. Oregon voted for Harris by 14 points in 2024, saw one of the smallest shifts toward Trump nationally, and Merkley won his last 2 races by more than 15 points. The latest odds via Kalshi have Merkley nearly certain to win next November with a 96% chance. As always, I'll leave a link in the description below for you to make your own predictions here as well. So Oregon is our first safe state on the 2026 Senate map. I also expect John Hickenlooper to comfortably win re-election in Colorado, which he said will be his final term in the Senate. First elected in 2020 after 2 terms as governor, Hickenlooper is a strong incumbent, and it should come as no surprise that he is also nearly certain to win with a 96% chance per Kalshi, also benefiting from the fact that Colorado has shifted further to the left than any other state over the past decade. Over in Illinois, longtime Democratic Senator Dick Durbin has announced he won't seek a 6th term, setting off a scramble among several prominent Illinois Democrats eager to capitalize on a rare open seat. Right now, Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy is the polling favorite, though the polling we have thus far is by no means conclusive. Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton and Congresswoman Robin Kelly are both pulling in double digits. Ultimately, this one should remain safely in the Democratic column regardless of who's nominated. Republicans simply don't have a strong enough candidate to overcome the state's deep blue fundamentals. While Illinois is certainly trending right, Kamala Harris still carried it by 11 points last November, and 2026 is expected to be a more favorable environment for Democrats than 2024 was. Finally, in the Northeast, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Delaware, and Virginia are all safe Democratic holds, with incumbents expected to run for re-election in each state. New Jersey did trend significantly toward Trump in the 2024 presidential race, but it remains a fundamentally Democratic-leaning state, and incumbent Cory Booker remains very popular. And while Virginia was also decided by a single-digit margin in 2024, incumbent Mark Warner is signaling that he intends to run for a 4th term. In that case, the only factor that could make this race competitive is if outgoing Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin throws his hat into the ring. Right now, Democrats are heavily favored with a 96% chance of winning in New Jersey, and a slightly narrower, yet still commanding 92% chance in the Commonwealth of Virginia. It'll be worth paying close attention to the margins in both Virginia and New Jersey's competitive governor races later this year, as they'll offer the first real test of Donald Trump's second-term popularity at the state level. All right, now for the Republicans. There are so many deeply red states on this map, they're barely worth discussing individually. The only retirements we know of so far are Mitch McConnell in Kentucky and Tommy Tuberville in Alabama, who's running for governor, but that won't change much. Kentucky and Alabama remain 2 of the most reliably Republican states in the nation. All told, these 15 solid states bring the Republican total to 47 seats, already just 3 shy of the 50 needed to retain control of the Senate. There is an outside chance that the races in Alaska, Kansas, South Carolina, or Florida could grow more competitive, particularly if 2026 turns into a strong blue wave year. In Alaska, however, with former Democratic Congresswoman Mary Peltola now expected to run for governor instead of Senate, incumbent Republican Dan Sullivan appears to have a clear path to re-election. Similarly, in Kansas, outgoing Democratic Governor Laura Kelly has made it clear she is absolutely not running for another office, paving the way for Senator Roger Marshall to cruise to a second term. In South Carolina, Senator Lindsey Graham is also expected to face a smoother path than he did in 2020, when despite being out-fundraised by Democratic challenger Jamie Harrison, he still won by double digits. And in Florida, as long as newly appointed Senator Ashley Moody secures the GOP nomination, Republicans are in strong shape to hold the seat. Moody has overperformed in both of her statewide races for Attorney General and is widely seen as a formidable general election candidate. That leaves us with just 11 states still without a rating, each of which is either expected to be competitive or carries enough uncertainty that assigning a safe rating at this stage would simply be premature. Before we proceed, let me take this moment to remind you to subscribe to my channel below. It's completely free, and it helps me make more videos like these in the future. Right now, YouTube Analytics is telling me less than 20% of my viewers are subscribed. Again, just hit that button below. It's free. Thanks so much. Alrighty, let's start in New Mexico, one of the 5 Senate seats Democrats are defending in states Kamala Harris carried by single digits in 2024. The incumbent is Ben Ray Lujan, elected to his first term in 2020 with a 6-point win over Republican Mark Ronchetti, who was relatively unknown at the time. However, according to Split Ticket's wins above replacement score, Lujan underperformed structural expectations by nearly 3 points, suggesting he's not particularly strong as a candidate. That said, without a credible Republican challenger, this seat is still very, very likely to remain in Democratic hands, as Lujan currently has a 93% chance of re-election according to Kalshi. I'm going to go ahead and place New Mexico in the likely blue column on my map. Then there's Texas. The Lone Star State saw the 6th largest Republican swing between 2020 and 2024, with Donald Trump expanding his margin from 5.5 points all the way up to 14. That shift effectively dashed any serious hopes Democrats had of unseating 4-term Republican Senator John Cornyn. But the dynamic has shifted now that Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton has officially launched a primary challenge against Cornyn, setting the stage for a high-stakes clash between the GOP establishment and its hardline conservative base. The two have long been at odds, with Paxton accusing Cornyn of being insufficiently conservative, while Cornyn has pointed repeatedly to Paxton's legal baggage, including his 2023 impeachment by the GOP-led Texas House. So far, neither Donald Trump nor Senator Ted Cruz has endorsed a candidate, with Trump's endorsement being considered critical in deciding the winner of the primary. Paxton has led Cornyn in every poll conducted so far, and usually by double digits, including the most recent survey via Pulse Decision Science that shows him above the runoff threshold with 57% to Cornyn's 38%. It's important to keep in mind here that Texas does hold runoff primary elections if no candidate receives more than 50% of the vote. Now, Cornyn does have a substantial war chest at his disposal and several endorsements from prominent U.S. senators. If he does survive the primary, he would likely win re-election comfortably, and Texas would stay in the safe Republican column. But if Paxton secures the nomination, the general election outlook will tighten significantly, especially with Colin Allred officially jumping into the race. Allred's candidacy is particularly notable given his strong performance in 2024, when he outpaced Kamala Harris in Texas by 5 points and came within 9 points of unseating Ted Cruz. The prediction markets now rate the primary as a coin flip, with Paxton no longer the clear favorite he once was. That alone carries major implications for the general election. A new YouGov/Texas Southern University poll finds Cornyn leading Allred by 4 points among 1,200 registered voters, while Paxton's edge over Allred is just 2. The same pattern holds across every other potential Democratic matchup. At this point, Republicans still have about an 80% chance of holding the seat, but those odds likely rise if Cornyn secures the nomination and slip if Paxton manages to pull off the upset. Up in Nebraska, Republican Pete Ricketts is running for his first full term in the Senate. He's not especially popular, even within his own party, and the return of independent Cinderella candidate Dan Osborne could pose a serious threat to his re-election prospects. Osborne proved himself a formidable fundraiser in 2024 when he came within 7 points of unseating incumbent Deb Fischer, and where he successfully positioned himself as neither a Democrat nor a Trump-aligned Republican. Right now, Ricketts is still clearly favored with a 79% chance of winning, which is good enough for a likely Republican rating on the map, but an upset isn't out of the question in a strong blue wave environment. Right next door in Iowa, Republican Senator Joni Ernst got herself in trouble during a town hall event in May, prompting several Democrats to jump into the race, seeing an opening even in a state that's shifted sharply to the right over the past decade. Trump carried Iowa by 13 points in 2024, the largest margin for either party since Nixon's 49-state landslide in 1972. But the negative reaction to Ernst's controversial comments have sparked rumors that she may retire, with Republican Congresswoman Ashley Hinson reportedly likely to enter the race if Ernst bows out. That development, combined with the emerging candidacies of J.D. Scholten and State Senator Zach Walz, have led both the Cook Political Report and Sabato's Crystal Ball to move the race into the likely Republican column. And those ratings are aligned with the prediction markets as well, which have Republicans favored with a 78% chance of winning. Again, click the link in the description to check out these numbers live, as they're always changing. Alrighty, so Iowa will go alongside Nebraska and Texas in that same likely Republican tier. Next is Minnesota, where Democrat Tina Smith has announced she won't seek a second full term, making this the first U.S. Senate race in the state without an incumbent since 2006. That also happens to be the last time Republicans won a federal election in Minnesota. Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan currently holds the early edge in the Democratic primary, with Congresswoman Angie Craig seen as the next most likely contender. On the Republican side, the most prominent name in the race so far is former NBA player Royce White, but he just lost to Senator Amy Klobuchar by 16 points last November. Unless the GOP manages to recruit a significantly stronger candidate, Flanagan, or whoever emerges as the Democratic nominee, should be favored to win comfortably. Minnesota goes down as likely Democratic on our map. Shifting across the Great Lakes, let's head to Michigan, where Democrat Gary Peters is also stepping down. This one poses more of a challenge for Democrats, given that they narrowly lost Michigan in the 2024 presidential race. While Democrat Alyssa Slotkin managed to narrowly win the state's open Senate seat last cycle, she did so by just 20,000 votes over former Republican Congressman Mike Rogers, who has now officially entered the 2026 race again. On the Democratic side, with both Pete Buttigieg and outgoing Governor Gretchen Whitmer declining to run, the party lacks a clear top-tier name. Congresswoman Haley Stevens is currently the frontrunner among declared candidates, with State Senator Mallory McMorrow close behind. Stevens has slightly outperformed fundamentals in her last 3 House races by about 1 or 2 points, but nothing especially notable. Traders still give Democrats a 3 in 4 chance of holding this seat, a reflection of the structural edge they've enjoyed in down-ballot races here for the past decade. I'm a bit less bullish for now. I'd keep Michigan in the tilt Democratic column, with a favorable national climate likely necessary to push them over the top. Down in Ohio, we're looking at a special election to fill the remainder of the Senate term vacated by Vice President J.D. Vance. Republican Governor Mike DeWine appointed Lieutenant Governor John Husted to the seat, and Husted is now running as an unelected incumbent. Meanwhile, we have some breaking news on the Democratic side regarding former Senator Sherrod Brown, who has officially mounted a comeback bid for 2026. It's hard to overstate how significant this recruitment is for the Democratic Party. Brown is widely seen as the only Democrat with a real shot at unseating Husted in 2026. He's already won 3 Senate races in Ohio, and even in last November's tough environment, when Trump carried the state by 11 points, Brown still managed to overperform Kamala Harris by 8 points. Thus, it should come as no surprise that Republican odds have fallen below 70%, with Brown and the Democrats now being given a 1 in 3 chance to pull off the flip. Of course, Trump won't be on the ballot in 2026, and if it turns out to be a strong Democratic wave year, Brown's chances would improve considerably. For now, though, I'm keeping this race in the lean Republican column. The only reason it's not in safe Republican territory is Brown himself. Husted, for his part, is also a formidable candidate, having served as Secretary of State and Lieutenant Governor. Let's head up to New England now, where we have 2 uniquely interesting contests. In New Hampshire, Democratic Senator Jeanne Shaheen is retiring, and Congressman Chris Pappas is the first to enter the race to succeed her. At this point, he's likely to remain the most prominent Democrat in the field. Unfortunately for Republicans, former Governor Chris Sununu decided against running. He would have been their strongest possible contender by far. Instead, it now looks like former Massachusetts Senator Scott Brown will likely win the GOP nomination. Brown's a strong candidate in his own right, and in a red wave year, he might even be favored over Pappas. But New Hampshire leans blue on fundamentals, and in an expected blue environment, Democrats are favored with an 85% chance right now. I've personally got this race in the lean Democratic column for now. Up in Maine, Republican Senator Susan Collins is a political unicorn. Back in 2020, nearly every poll and analyst predicted her defeat, yet she beat Democrat Sarah Gideon by 8 points, even as Joe Biden carried Maine by 9. To this day, she remains the only Republican to win a Senate race in a state simultaneously carried by a Democratic presidential nominee since 2004. Looking ahead to 2026, Maine is the only Republican-held seat in a state that Kamala Harris won, and it's widely considered Democrats' top pickup opportunity. Their best possible challenger would have been Congressman Jared Golden, but he has declined. If Golden did run, Democrats would probably have been favorites, but without him, their most established option is outgoing Governor Janet Mills, who doesn't necessarily boast awe-inspiring approval numbers. If Democrats can at least persuade Mills to run, this could end up being a generational fumble. Maine's D+4 partisan lean suggests that in a neutral national environment, a generic Democrat should beat a generic Republican here by around 8 points. While Susan Collins has proven she can overperform expectations by that margin in the past, it's more likely than not that the national environment in 2026 will lean Democratic, which would further advantage any reasonably strong Democratic nominee. But as of now, without a credible challenger in the race, I have to give Collins the edge. All right, let's wrap things up along the Atlantic coastline with the 2 highest-profile Senate races of the 2026 cycle, North Carolina and Georgia. There's a good chance that when we look back on this election, these 2 contests will define which party enters 2028 with momentum. In North Carolina, Republican Senator Thom Tillis has announced he won't seek a 3rd term. His departure wasn't entirely unexpected. Tillis had long faced criticism from the right, censured by the state GOP back in 2023 for his bipartisan support on immigration, gun control, and same-sex marriage. But what seems to have sealed it was his recent vote against President Trump's so-called Big Beautiful Bill. And now, with Tillis out, President Trump decided to back a candidate more aligned with his style of politics in RNC Chairman Michael Whatley. Without any prior electoral history, it's hard to predict how Whatley will perform in a general election, given his election denialist stance after 2020 and how poorly those kinds of candidates fared in the midterms. There's a real possibility he ends up a below-average contender, which is especially tough considering the presumptive Democratic nominee is Roy Cooper, arguably the strongest non-incumbent in the entire country. He left the governor's office earlier this year with high approval ratings, near universal name recognition across North Carolina, and a powerful fundraising network already in place. Cooper might have even been favored had Tillis stayed in the race. But now, in an open seat race, he starts off as the clear favorite over Whatley, with Kalshi's market giving Cooper a 2 in 3 chance of winning the general election next November. I'm placing North Carolina in the tilt Democrat column. Finally, in Georgia, outgoing Governor Brian Kemp's decision not to run for Senate was, at the time, the worst news Republicans received all cycle. Kemp, much like Roy Cooper in North Carolina, is a popular, battle-tested leader in a politically competitive state. He would have been the strongest possible Republican to challenge Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff, and might even have been favored to flip the seat, despite Ossoff's considerable strengths as a candidate. Ossoff made history in 2020 by defeating incumbent David Perdue in a high-stakes runoff, and has since built a formidable political brand and fundraising machine. Without Kemp, Republicans lack a clear top-tier alternative. Congressman Buddy Carter and Mike Collins are the most prominent names to enter the race so far, but neither candidate is particularly well-positioned to compete at the scale this race demands. In fact, the general public is so low on those potential nominees that Ossoff now has a better than 70% chance to win re-election on Kalshi, after having previously been the underdog. It's also important to note that while much of the country swung sharply to the right between 2020 and 2024, Georgia and North Carolina did not. Both states are experiencing gradual demographic shifts that continue to benefit Democrats, expanding, diversifying metro areas, and a steady influx of college-educated transplants from traditionally blue regions in the Northeast and West. Put it all together, and Jon Ossoff now holds a clear edge in what was once shaping up to be the GOP's best flip opportunity of the cycle. So with all that said, we land at a projected 52 to 48 Republican majority, with Democrats gaining one seat. And while their path to a majority remains narrow, it does exist. Most likely, it would require flipping Maine, currently rated as tilt Republican, and then taking two of the following likely Republican seats: Ohio, Iowa, Nebraska, Texas, or Alaska. That's just my current read based on where the national environment and candidate dynamics stand today. But of course, it's still early. The map can and will shift. Feel free to share your thoughts on the map in the comments below and let me know what topics or races you'd like me to cover next. That's it for today's video. Huge thanks to my channel members, all listed in the description. Don't forget to hit subscribe and drop a like if you enjoyed the content. Check out more videos here, and as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. EP out.